We've been listening to dramatic words involving President Trump's special Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, along with Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, speak over at Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. That's where families have been gathering as they wait for the release of their loved ones. CNN has learned the hostages could return from captivity as soon as Sunday overnight into Monday. Very dramatic words we heard from Witkoff and Kushner. I'm joined now by CNN's chief international correspondent, Clarissa Ward, and CNN's senior White House reporter, Kevin Liptak. Clarissa, it was very powerful what these three people really had to say.
Well, I think what was most striking to me initially were the chants were, thank you, Witkoff, thank you, Kushner, thank you, Trump. Who was not mentioned was Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And then when Steve Witkoff actually thanked Prime Minister Netanyahu, you heard, Wolf, those crowds were booing. And it's worth mentioning that Netanyahu has never gone to Hostage Square. So very interesting to see how President Trump and his team have sort of emerged as the heroes of this here in Israel. You've seen the billboards all around town thanking them. And that crowd really making it very clear that they believe that actually Trump and Witkoff and Kushner deserve the credit, and many of them that I've been speaking to over the past months, days, years now believe that Netanyahu has actually been an impediment to getting those hostages home. So yes, very impassioned words from all three of them. Clearly also an element of sort of doing a victory lap here, although cautioning as well that, you know, we can really only celebrate tomorrow. One thing I also noted as well, though, Wolf, is that there was no mention of the Palestinian suffering, of the 67,000 people killed in Gaza, of the horrific bombardment of 2 years and the enormous work it's going to take to rebuild, and the tremendous humanitarian catastrophe that is playing out. This was a speech really for Israel and for Israelis. And
you make the important point that every time that President Trump was mentioned, there was applause, cheers, thank you, thank you, thank you, Trump. We kept hearing that. And the one time that Witkoff mentioned Netanyahu, there were boos actually coming.
Boos. He couldn't get through his
speech. And a
speech.
lot of Israelis believe that Netanyahu, the prime minister, did not do enough to try to achieve the release of those Israeli hostages. And that's why there were those boos from those family members and friends and supporters who had gathered here in Tel Aviv at Hostage Square. I was there earlier today, and I began to feel that as well as I saw what was the reaction over there.
And I think a lot of them have been a little circumspect about criticizing the prime minister up until this point because they haven't wanted to do anything that could somehow interfere with the release of the hostages. But now I think you're going to start to see people really let it rip, because there was a lot of anger behind closed doors, and there was a lot of resentment, and there was a deep-seated belief from many Israelis that Prime Minister Netanyahu's priority was not, in fact, bringing home the hostages, but rather his own political survival, Wolf.
Yeah, and in contrast to the reaction when the Netanyahu name was mentioned, when they mentioned the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, the soldiers of the IDF, and what they've been doing, there was applause and cheers and gratitude coming from that crowd.
Absolutely. And of course, endless applause for President Trump. Endless applause for President Trump.
And when I was there, I even saw people wearing Make America Great Again hats in that crowd over at Hostage Square earlier today. We have a special interview with a woman who survived being a hostage. That's going to be coming up very soon. I want to go over right now. We got some more coming in from what's going on right now. Kevin Liptak, our senior White House reporter, has been watching what's going on. Kevin, update our viewers what we know.
Yeah, and I'll also say it was interesting to listen to Witkoff thank some of the other Arab leaders in the region who also received a measure of applause, whether it was the Emir of Qatar or the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Even they received applause from the crowd that was really not having any mention of Benjamin Netanyahu, which I think gives you a sense of the sentiments there. You know, it was interesting to hear from Jared Kushner. He has no formal role in the administration at this point. This is really the first time that we've heard from him publicly describing some of his role in all of this, as well as Ivanka. Obviously, if you've been paying attention to the Trump administration, the first one, that would have been a familiar sight. They were senior advisors in the White House. This time around, they have no formal role. They're living in Miami, but Jared Kushner has been quite intimately involved in this particular issue, which is trying to get this war resolved. And so it was notable to see him come out and speak in a way that we haven't just yet so far. We understand that he will continue being involved in these talks going forward as they enter the next phase, as they talk about some of the very thorny issues that remain, whether it's disarming Hamas or getting Israel to withdraw further from Gaza, or, of course, the eventual idea of a Palestinian state. He'll remain engaged in these discussions. And it was notable when he said during his speech that we're not going to celebrate tonight, that they're going to celebrate once these hostages are out. And I think that underscores what we've been hearing from American officials over the last several days, which is that this is still a very fragile moment. This deal is a delicate one. As one U.S. official said late last week, there's still a lot of ways that this can go wrong. That's one of the reasons that Kushner and Witkoff stuck around in Israel after this deal was signed, essentially to ensure that it remains in place, that there are no misunderstandings, that they're able to sort of adjudicate any questions that either of the two sides have. And so while it was a celebratory moment there in all three of those speeches, I think when you were listening closely, you did detect that level of delicacy that still exists. You know, no one, I don't think, is going to breathe easy until they see all of those hostages actually coming out of Gaza, Wolf.
And what a lot of people don't necessarily appreciate was the role that Jared Kushner played during the first Trump administration in achieving that historic Abraham Accords agreement that established full diplomatic relations between Israel and several Arab countries. He was instrumental in helping to put that together, right?
Yeah, and those countries were the UAE, Bahrain, several other ones. It was probably the biggest diplomatic accomplishment of the president's first term. And the way that Kushner went about it was to try and develop very deep relationships with the leaders in those regions. He, had texting relationships with a number of them, including the powerful Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Saudi Arabia is sort of the biggest prize in the Abraham Accords, and that's something that President Trump, I think, still wants to accomplish now that the Gaza war seems to be coming to a close. Kushner's role here is not without some controversy. He has very deep business interests in the region. He has a private investment firm that's taken billions of dollars from some of these countries' sovereign wealth funds. But I think what he's doing here is sort of demonstrating that a deal-making sort of prowess and acumen is what was needed in all of this. At least that's according to the president's supporters and people who are close to this, who described the way he and Witkoff kind of approached these negotiations over the last several months or so. Jared Kushner has said previously, and Ivanka Trump has said previously, that coming back into the political sphere is something that they have no interest in. They were somewhat scarred, I think, by their first experience during the president's first term, and Kushner has been joking to people over the last couple of days that once he got back to Miami, Ivanka Trump might have changed the locks on their house because she didn't want sort of to become involved in the politicking again. But obviously, because this was successful, you see them standing there in a way that sort of underscores the successes that he was able to accomplish. Now, his detractors will say that this is naivete, that there are a lot of issues that they haven't resolved in these talks that could lead to this being just a pause in a conflict that's been going on for decades. But at least for now, I think there is a sense of a celebration that this deal has made it at least to where it is now.
And let's hope it works out in these next few days. Kevin Liptak at the White House for us. Thank you very, very much.